Coming to you from Central and South Texas. Pre-recorded, socially distant. Welcome to the Waking Shift podcast.
Welcome to the Waking Shift podcast. Right, this is John. I'm joined with my good friend Todd there.
Hello.
And then, of course, Mr. Will. Welcome, Will.
Hello. Hello.
Now, of course, Todd is just meeting Will, but I've known Will for a good long time. We've taken some classes together in our alma mater at A&M Kingsville. We spent, more time together, I guess, in philosophy courses?
And in debate.
Yes.
For the clubs and all that jazz.
And debate was fun. That's one of the inspirations behind a lot of the friendships I'm bringing on the podcast, at least the first few. It's just that good, wonderful spirit of debate because, Will and I do differ on some opinions, on some points. But the whole wondrous nature of it is basically arguing through those points and finding more about where the other person sits, rather than just kind of vilifying the other opinion, right?
Indeed, yeah.
So that's something we definitely learned from there. And so right now, where are you at? You're in your lovely office, right? I'm
in the office in South Texas.
Yes. That's what I was going to say. How detailed do you want to be there, right? But yeah, South Texas. Did y'all get hit by that storm?
Oh, the hurricane?
Yeah.
Oh, it was... No, not really. So, it was too south. I mean, we got a little rain, but it wasn't even like an inch. Like, it was like a half inch on the farm. And really, the rain we got wasn't from the hurricane. It was from the low pressure of the hurricane.
It was the surrounding stuff.
Around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like the low pressure stayed around for a while, and we got storms because of that. But it wasn't from the hurricane. No, the coast got hit, though.
Oh, I know. Like, I'll lead into Todd. I'll let Todd speak last there because I know he has way more to say about this than either of us. But I'm still plugged into social media in the Valley. So I look at the Valley and Corpus and I see all this storm surge and power going out and all this mayhem. And I open my front door and it's just birds singing and sunshine. And I'm like,
polar opposite.
Yeah.
What's going on down here?
Yeah. And I just remember kind of like feeling bad for my friends in the Valley. But then I was just like, geez, like Texas is this huge. Texas is this massive to where we can have the southern tip experiencing like gale force winds, and I'm over here just kind of enjoying my coffee in a warm summer day. Same state, same freaking state.
Too big. It's too big here, John.
It is.
It's too much to travel, too much to look at.
For anyone listening that's not aware of Texas, I'm in Central Texas. I can drive 4 hours in any direction and still be in Texas.
Yeah, basically.
So that's the kind of thing. So Todd, please tell us your lovely, how far you want to go into experience.
It's not very different from other people's stories, I guess. We didn't get hit necessarily that hard. We got kind of the outskirts of the storm, but even that's enough to kind of rattle cages here. Most of a good portion of this area was out of power. Some people, for me, it almost happened immediately. Like I had barely had droplets coming down on the roof, and the power was out instantly.
Which is so frustrating too, I bet.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, I guess. It shouldn't be too bad because I knew it wasn't going to actually hit us. But I guess at that point I had way too much faith in the electric company. And then I think a mutual friend of ours, Josh, has a different provider. He lives doesn't live that far from me.
What,
maybe, he got his power 2 miles back that same day.
Yeah. He lives like maybe 2 miles from you at most.
2.5, yeah, something like that. Relatively close. And he got his power back immediately. And I was without it, and and a lot of people were without it, obviously, for somewhere between. Well, I was out of it for like a whole week, and then some people I know didn't get it back until the beginning of August. And another mutual friend of ours was two friends of ours were telling me, this is weeks ago now, that they got a notification from the electric company saying, you're not going to get it back until August so and so, and I'm like, that's ridiculous.
That is, especially in 2020. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. So I was frustrated, but I knew, like, okay, well, I've lived here all my life. I've already gone through this. This shouldn't surprise me. But it's definitely a little different when you're paying for the bill, and then it's like, hey, like I understand that people are out of power, and it's not just me, but I really wish y'all would have prepared better and communicated better to your customers. So I was just really annoyed with it, and it came down to us having to someone in my neighborhood giving them a call, getting a hold of them because I have a neighbor that's on oxygen, and they
Oh,
had to borrow someone's generator just to keep them alive. So at that point, they quickly came and took care of it. When I figured that out, I thought, okay, so you could have actually just turned this on whenever you wanted. There was just a priority list or something.
yeah, which makes
Um,
sense, especially because I mean, the valley is as much as it is the relative metropolis in the area. The valley is just not equipped for this stuff, and they just don't operate as quickly. Like the whole modernization, quick nature of the cities like Austin, Houston, San Antonio, just haven't hit the valley yet.
yeah, so their infrastructure is kind of it's there is none, and that they have really terrible communication. I have no problem with the crews that are out working.
Oh
They're
no,
doing their
no, for
job.
sure, for sure.
Every time I made a comment about it to them, I'm like, hey, I got no problem with the people out there working. It's y'all they got to figure out. Give us some kind of timeline. Give us something to like kind of calm be calm with some information. And then it came back, but it was pretty bad. Like it gets really hot down here, and luckily we
Will
were
can know.
able.
Will experiences Texas heat.
Okay, yeah. So the three of us are cursed with this
Oh
insufferable
yeah,
heat.
exactly. Yeah, we.
It's funny. Go ahead.
No, go for it. What are you saying?
I always tell anybody. I always tell anyone who like asks me about where I live or whatever. Anytime I travel, and they're like, I tell them, you know what? I've lived here all my life. I've never gotten used to the heat. And I've just never gotten used to it.
I don't
Well,
think
you
you can.
can't. You can't get used to the kind of heat that we get.
I don't
I
think so
mean,
either.
you just walk outside and it's like an oven. It hits you in the face. And that's on a day where the humidity's low. When the humidity's high, you can walk back inside and it's just sitting on you still
hmm
because it's like you took a dive into a big bowl of soup.
That's what
Yeah.
I say. I always say that when it gets hot and humid down here, it just ultimately feels like you're walking through water. I mean, and chemically, like that's basically what's happening. You know what I mean? But it's just it feels so frustrating because not only are you like walking through an oven on a good day, but you're the oven's got steam all over it on a bad day.
Yeah, you're being basted.
Yeah, basically, and it's ridiculous. And that's when I honestly thought like the way you handled that, I would have gone damn near mad. I'm surprised you didn't go Robinson Crusoe in your own damn property and like just lose your mind a bit. Start talking to a
I
parrot and shit.
I had definitely was kind of out of it. We got that generator a couple of days late, thanks to a family friend that was completely unaffected by what was happening. So they're like, "Hey, you want to borrow the generator?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. At least for the refrigerator, like if I can't keep myself cold, at least I can keep all the stuff that's perishable cold."
Ah, dude,
And I unfortunately had some neighbors that lost everything. And to be fair, you can say, "Well, they weren't prepared." It's like, yeah, but you would think that
well,
our
it's
electric
because
company would be a little more prepared excuse me, prepared for the kind of situations, these kind of like these storms and stuff, because they have serviced this area
for so
since
long.
the early 1900s. You think they would have figured out how to really strengthen that infrastructure? And I feel like none of the money they get goes to any of that. So
No, and I definitely think that's the case. Like I said, I would go mad. I would go mad in that. Like a day or two, I can handle. But I mean, Will, just to give you some perspective, he lives off a main street.
Yeah. Okay.
So he lives off a main street, like it's not rural town, you know.
Yeah.
And so I mean, and not to say that that'd be any more acceptable, but it would be more understandable, maybe.
Oh
But
yeah. I mean, because I'm from the country, so when we have power outages, we have to call up our power company. But the power company, the one we have, I'm not going to say names. They're usually they're usually pretty good. But my grandmother's been a member of that power company because it's a co-op
mhm.
since like the beginning
jeez,
because that power company came out of the Rural Electrification Administration, REA,
so it
or
literally like
maybe it's agency. But yeah, literally since Roosevelt's New Deal electrified
The city.
The rural areas.
Yeah. Oh,
in the
geez.
South, and that co-op came, in a kind of winding fashion out of that system. So she still says, "Oh, the power's down. I better call REA," and it's like, well, you mean the co-op, but I understand.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, why
And so
argue at that point?
they're fairly fast, but it's also the country, so I don't know anything about
Yeah, it's
how it
very
all
different.
works. I
Exactly.
just know that when I flip a switch, the lights come on. I don't know what makes it work.
And that's kind of
But,
what I was getting to as well, is that's ultimately what we expect now in like 2020, because electricity, even though the bill can be a pain sometimes, for what we actually use is pretty freaking cheap.
It is.
But it's just ridiculous because we depend on it so much that that we just don't know what to do without it. But so yeah, that's kind of like the storm wrap up. Will, you and I got the better half of that. I feel my heart still goes out to you because I don't think Todd. I don't think that company could replace the time.
No, I was, and that's because I was working on stuff, and then it wasn't until I had the generator that I was able to like even juice my phone and stuff. My batteries, all my externals were completely dead, and so I'm like, I wasn't gonna go out, because I had already gone out to buy groceries, and I don't go out unless I absolutely have to, considering
Everything.
the moment in time that we're in. So I'm like, I'm not gonna go out to buy another external battery, so I'm just gonna sit here and suffer. So
deal
there
with
was
it,
like 2 days where I didn't have a phone, and unfortunately it just it further tells me how dependent we are on the phone. But I was working on something, and I just totally lost it at that point. I was just it was just an icky situation. But I'm glad I'm out of it. I'm glad everyone here for the most part is out of it, so that's good.
No, that's good. That's what I said. It's kind of why I brought up the whole Robinson Crusoe kind of like castaway perspective, because you're kind of on an island. It feels that way without the phone. But okay, so I have one question for y'all before we jump into the topic. Well, Will, is there anything you wanted to say or talk about before I ask this random question?
Yeah, Todd said something that I wanted to touch on real quick. You mentioned that you had a generator like for your refrigerator, so you were able to like save your food for one.
Mhm.
And then there's a lot of people who lost everything, obviously, because your refrigerator only stays cold for so long
Maybe a day.
after the power loses, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
maybe a day.
And it's like, well, a lot of people lost all of that, and you said, well, maybe you could say they didn't prepare very well, right? But it's like, even then, even if they had prepared, like you have to be able to afford a generator,
Yeah.
and like even like your typical middle class people, just just these John PQ citizens, whatever their name is, even they sometimes can't just afford to go get a generator. And it's
Right.
like, so when the power company says, "Oh, it's going to be 2 weeks before you get power again," sorry, it's pretty messed up.
It is, especially
because
yeah.
because now you've got a whole group of a whole town, sections of a whole town, who are told you're not going to have power for a while. Well, now they all need generators. Well, how many of them are going to get them?
Very few.
few.
Many borrowing them, and that's kind of the thing that bugs me about it more, is that the company that we're talking about is a big provider of the RGV, and the RGV is primarily middle to lower SES individuals, and so as they frankly depend on the electricity a lot more, right? When they think prepare for a storm, it's probably mainly get food, maybe tape up the windows, things like that. Board up things, but I mean, a lot of people aren't going to think to power up the refrigerator. Unfortunately,
Yeah, that was my first concern. Like once everything went
Good
out,
thinking,
I'm like,
man.
the fridge,
Yeah,
the fridge,
good
and that's
thinking.
because, to be fair, that's because I had just came back from the store the day before, so it was
I would
like,
have
really
been
fresh in my mind.
so freaking angry if I would have lost a whole grocery list's worth of stuff. Jesus Christ!
Well, we had to eat the ice cream.
Damn right you had to eat the ice cream. Damn
Well,
right.
Well, I guess it could have, honestly, it could have lasted a day longer when we got the generator, but we're like, well, we're miserable, we don't care, we're gonna indulge, and that's what we did.
Todd, I just have like an existential vision of you like just popping open the freezer, just staring at the ice cream.
Yeah, that's I was doing it. It was midnight, day 2 with a flashlight, and I'm like, I can't sleep. It's impossible. Like, my dog is barking like crazy, and mosquitoes are coming. Like, I'm just gonna sit here on these steps in the dark and eat this ice cream. And that's exactly what I did.
I have a picture in my mind of you know the meme where it's a dog sitting at a table and there's a fire all around
Yup.
it and it says it's fine. It's you, and there's no fire, but there's a lot of mosquitoes, and you're just eating ice cream, going, "Nope, this is fine." Bark, bark, bark. This is fine. Nothing the matter. Slaps mosquito. I'm gonna eat my Rocky Road.
Yup.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way.
Yeah, and now I need that illustrated, so I'm gonna have to commission something from somebody.
Hey, well, I mean, I know a possible illustrator if you can convince him.
You do.
But okay, so I want to segue into this random question that I thought would be really interesting to answer. And I can go first if you all want to think about an answer. But the way they worded it is kind of odd. But basically, what's your favorite meal that you would eat regardless of where you are financially? And the way the question pivots it is they say, quote, "What's your favorite poverty meal?" Basically meaning, what's that thing you would eat that costs little to nothing, that you probably ate because you had little to nothing, that you would consistently eat even when your pockets or wallet is full? I already kind of have an answer to that one. I don't know if y'all do.
I think this is actually, if you don't mind, I'll go first. This is actually really easy for me. I'm pretty basic. Like, I can totally just do bean tacos.
Nice.
With a little bit of cheese or some like vegetables. Like, that's always been a thing for me, like in my family, in my life. And yeah, even when I was at like my best moments, like I would come home and after work and I would just kind of make that instead of going and spending some money on I guess a nicer meal. But that's something that'll probably always stick with me because I know it's easy to make, it's easy to get a hold of.
Isn't it weird how those things kind of stick with you? Especially if you ate it at a time where you didn't have much. Now that might not be the case, but like you're saying, like it isn't much. Like that's like the survival mode for any like Latino family, I think.
Yeah.
Is beans and cheese.
The thing is, it's effective.
Oh yeah, no, it's what you need. It has a good amount of the stuff you need. Not perfect, right? Nothing is, but speaking to like Will's point earlier, like if you're living in poverty or middle wage, sometimes you don't have the capacity for some of this stuff. Mine kind of came out of something like that too. Yeah, my family experienced like rocky times, and during that, like there weren't many snacks during those time periods. They were just kind of big meals, but in between those meals, as a kid, you get hungry and stuff. And I basically like experimented with everything you could combine with a saltine cracker. And I was like a scientist. I was like, what is tolerable? And ultimately,
what is tolerable with a saltine?
It worked, Will. It worked. And I tried some really random stuff, but it ultimately ended with what every person at a dinner party is familiar with, which just crackers and cheese. Now there's the pompous version, which is much more delectable and variant, and I too go that way myself now, especially with Ryan, our good mutual friend Ryan Watkins. But this individual literally has a cheese plate that a stone tablet that he puts all these cheeses on, and like it's really interesting. But my favorite thing that I will never tire of is I would literally put 4 crackers down, so a 2x2 if we're thinking Minecraft. So a 2x2, and then I would put a slice of cheese there, and then a 2x2, and then I would peel it off, peel off the slices, and I would just eat that. And I would gauge how much I was eating by how many slices of cheese, how many 2x2s I had. And so like that I will eat no matter what. Hell yeah, dude. I had a lot of time. I was like that.
The food I consume by 2x2s because I like Minecraft.
No, that's totally done from the past. I just did that because look, I didn't want to dirty my hands, sully these hands with cheese. I just threw it on the plate and it had a natural shape to it, sir. Just happened to be 2x2 saltine. What's yours, Will? I'm curious.
See, I was gonna say tacos, and I really was, and then Todd beat me to it, but I think the answer still stands. And I mean any taco, because if you go to like you can make it at home, or if you've got $1.60 in your pocket and that's it, you can go out and get a taco.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And and if you want one good taco, you can get one from like the local Mexican restaurant, or you can go through a drive-through fast food and get a single taco that's shitty. Oh, I'm not supposed to cuss. That's
You're fine.
not delectable.
You're fine.
That is subpar. But either way, you go home with a taco,
Yeah.
and like taco's just good.
It's just one of those
It's
really
just
good
always
things.
gonna be.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of those. I mean, it's one of those. I think like every culture brings something to the party, and I think tacos is just the Latin culture's way of saying you can't get rid of us. Like, like we have inspired you beyond your understanding. Like the fact that there exists a Taco Tuesday means that Latinos are here to stay. Just the fact that we have that. I mean, because it's also just interesting culture of. I had someone from our alma mater, Will, one of the DJs that used to DJ around there. Not DJ DeMarcus, but another DJ. He used to. He made a meme talking about the tacos in Texas.
I know who you're talking about. I don't want to drop his name necessarily.
Neither do I. Yeah, neither do I.
Okay.
Yeah, and so out of respect, but I don't think he'd mind. But out of respect. And so I think he made that meme, and that meme was so perfect. There's also like a regionality notion to tacos, and there's this. I swear, people from the valley and people who come to like Central Texas, it's almost like a duty to find the right taco place. Like the person charges themselves with looking for home via food.
Yeah, this is very true, John. Because if you don't mind me injecting here a little
Go
bit,
for it.
yeah, the first time I went to Seattle a couple of years ago, actually the second time, I definitely asked that question. I'm like, all right, so where's the good Mexican food? Like, I'm just curious to see what it's like over here, like how different it is, or what's been changed, right? And my friends, unfortunately, just had from the area just had nothing good to say to me, and they were like, well, there's a Taco Bell. I'm like, my soul really hurts right now, but you know what, I understand, because you guys have probably never had you guys have never had a Mexican taco.
Yeah, well, they don't know. I mean, it's an argument from ignorance. Like, and ignorance is not a bad word. It just sounds terrible. But
it does. It really does.
It bites way more than it should. But yeah, a lot of people just don't know. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it, because I actually I've met a few people who've pointed me in the right directions, and I found like different variations of Mexican food here in Austin. And a lot of people say like there's no good tacos in Austin. And I'm like, no, sometimes there's not easy to find tacos in Austin. But if you know a couple places, like there's some really good spots. Like obviously with the current context, I haven't been back to Austin as much, but it used to be a thing for my good friend Ryan and I just to kind of go up there, look for a new Mexican spot, a new Latino place just to eat. And just find a good spot. And after finding a couple of those spots, it is weird how you identify with the area, because tacos are definitely kind of a homey thing.
It is, and despite going there a couple times consecutively over the last couple years, I was never able to find a good taco place.
Talking about Seattle,
but that's because I wasn't looking everywhere. Obviously, I was there for a reason, so my time to explore the city was limited. But I was always looking it up. I was looking it up online on Reddit and stuff, and I was like, hey, nobody's talking about a good taco place around here.
I can guarantee you, it's on the outskirts.
Probably, it's definitely not in Seattle. Like Seattle Center.
Unfortunately,
definitely nowhere near there.
Unfortunately, there's something I found out by looking for food in San Antonio and in Austin and in Houston. Is that you got to follow the SES. So like great Latino food, I had to go to the middle or low SES parts of town, and just like they're located with the culture, I think, like, and they're usually found in little pockets. Now, and I did find like a couple spots in Austin, but they were like randomly placed. You know what I mean? Like just kind of like here's a really great spot, and then here's like a shoe store. Like it was just, it was like really random because of how like densely put together Austin is. But Will, I'm curious. What's last thing? Because on this point, what's the favorite taco? What's the one?
If I got money in my pocket, I like to get a chorizo egg, potato, and cheese.
Nice.
That's one taco. That's a singular item.
Yes. I understand. That's good.
Because it's perfect together. Because the spicy saltiness of the chorizo, the egg, the potato, you get that good starch, and then cheese, because everything's better with cheese.
Yes,
just everything.
I would agree. I learned that before, because they had the Q taco in the Valley, which is kind of a combination of some of those things. But now I remember one time we went through, back when I was in a big band or whatever, we had like 6-7 people. We went to one place to get some stuff before going to practice, get some food, and our friend starts the order. He's like, "I'll have 2 potato and egg, bacon, bean, and cheese, tacos, and if you can put like lines and salsa on the side." And he's like, "I want 2 of these," and the person like didn't have a combo for this, so she wrote down all the items individually. Right. And then like everybody in the back hears this and we're like, yeah, we'll take like 7 more of those.
Something that's not on the menu.
Yeah. And at that point they just like got wide eyed and they're like, basically go tell the chef, like, we're going to put all this in. And it was like, just, I'm with you. I'm just all about having a freaking loaded taco. If I could have an entire breakfast plate in a tortilla, I'm down.
Like that's the point of it, though.
Exactly.
The taco is a mobile breakfast.
Yep.
It's like, hey, you've got things to do, so you can get out the door real quick. You can shove this in your face, and you're full.
Dude,
that's why I love a taco.
It's how the freaking oh god, go for it.
Oh, I was gonna say a taco. A taco is comfort food on the go. And also, to put in another point, John, you were talking about like finding good tacos in Austin. I'm not going to say the name of the business, but don't be going to no bougie taco place.
No, yeah, no.
I'm not going to say the name of the business, but we know what the name of the business is. But don't be going to no bougie taco place with like neon signs and that kind of garbage. You go to a place that has like, grandma in the back making tortillas, because that food is going to be so much better at half the price.
Yep, that's the truth.
And they could charge double because it's better.
But they don't, and that's the kind of.
But they don't.
Exactly, and not to say, because I will say that there are some, not that spot, but there are some really good like fusion combos where they really do kind of mix both worlds together really well. But yeah, no. If we're talking about authenticity, like Todd, next time you come up in the area, like I already have 2-3 spots in mind, like.
Oh, lovely.
And so that's something that I've done my work to make sure that when people come up here that they have an understanding. All right.
I am down to inspect these places, John.
Yes, we must. And of course, Will as well.
John, take him by the bougie joint. But don't buy nothing. Don't buy nothing. Just take him by it.
I mean, you can't miss it.
Look at it.
You can't miss it. Like, yeah, no.
They've made it so you can't.
Yeah, no, you can't miss it.
I feel like after the show, you have to tell me what this place is. I feel like I know what you're talking about.
You probably do.
I feel like.
Oh, I bet you do.
Yeah, I bet you do. Like, there's no way you can kind of run away from the culture of that place. But all right, so is there anything you want to chat about before we go into the topics that we had kind of planned out earlier? Or that's the songs.
I think we should be good.
How about you, Will?
No, let's roll on.
Down to talk about Landlord first?
Sure.
All right, so just for those listening, and I'll go ahead and link these into the chat, or into the discussion, pardon. I'm going to go ahead and write down the timestamp too, so I have that info. But we're going to talk about David Rovics, right? Talking about the song Landlord.
Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man? While the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the
It has
right?
this other title too, which is "Who Gave You the Right." But I think it gives him that title because it's at the end of the song, right? At the end of the song, he says that. Let's see.
Yeah, and it's part of the chorus as well.
So this was released in 2013, and I'll go ahead and probably put a small clip of it in here, very short, of course. And then, what did you think of it? Like, so first, is there anything you want to say about it before we talk about it, Will?
Well, I think you know, I really like David Rovics. First of all, I think he writes really good, heartfelt, and politically cutting music. Not all of it is, but a lot of it is. And this song is, I mean, for today, for right now, for what we're living in, I mean, people losing jobs, you still have to pay rent, and you don't have a job, so how can you pay rent?
Yeah.
And so, what are the options you're being faced with here? And not all, like, part of you wants to say, like, well, not all landlords are bad people, and that would be true. I mean,
Yes.
even if you just looked at it from statistics and probability, not
Exactly.
all landlords can be bad people. Therefore,
Some are good.
but some are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to say, that like I've seen things on the internet where like landlords are getting into the loan business now to be like, oh, well, if you can't afford to pay rent, I'll give you a loan so you can pay rent, and then I'll just slap 10% on the loan and you won't be homeless then.
Yeah.
Well, how desperate are you? Are you going to take the loan? So now you owe rent
Yeah.
and 10%.
Well, that's what we
So
just
they're
saw.
making more money.
That's what we just saw. I haven't looked into the details, but I know the Prezi. Because I'm not gonna go with the full title, but I know the Prezi went ahead and extended it through extended some of those eviction protections. I think a couple of days ago, if not yesterday, right?
I believe it was day before yesterday, but I saw video footage of it yesterday. Yes.
Yeah. So I had seen that he had done that, but I'm not too sure exactly how far that goes. I need to look into how far that goes.
Well, that just delays eviction.
No, for sure. The problem is still present. There needs to
Right.
be some good discussion on how exactly, because I mean this is unprecedented. We've never really had to deal with this, and it really, going back to the song, I do like. Well, first things first. No population is thoroughly good or bad. Even the baddies. Are we the baddies? Even the baddies have at least some inclination of at least a middle moral. But the notion of, does that mean that groups are either all good or all bad, right? Because I think we have that problem with talking about any population. Whenever we're trying to talk about any group, we have a tendency to try and say they're either all this or all that, which is never the case for any population. And so here we do have, some good ones, some good landlords. We're not talking about them, right? We're more talking about some of the people who are more inclined to just kind of get greedy, which is a natural human tendency given the wrong pressures. And so, yeah, this song just leans in on the notion of the landlord, which kind of goes into the whole notion of someone coming in, like when they come into the nation, how they basically bought both sides of the Hudson River shore.
Yeah, this song is it's about at the beginning of the United States, back even before it was the United States during the colonial period, one man and his heirs after him own a huge swath of land. It's like 500,000 acres.
Yeah.
Which he of course cannot work himself, so he of course gets tenants, and they pay something like 30% of everything they grow to the landlord
to pay their
so he's
rent.
getting to pay rent. So 30% yearly of what they grow goes to the landlord, and then his son, and then his son, and they keep doing it. And up until a certain point, he had never, like, the original owner of the land never went there. I don't even think his son went there. I think his grandson eventually went to uh, America.
Oh,
So they
that's
were getting
interesting. So they weren't even Americans or in America.
well, they were on paper. I mean,
Oh, but they
but
just weren't residents at the time. Like,
they weren't. I mean, they weren't Americans. I mean, the guy in the 1840s is when they actually have the tenant farmers of New York strike. So he would have come to America to live there because he had a huge investment he had to look after.
so I do want to
Probably
say
more so than he would have in Europe.
no, for sure, and I kind of want to add, like, talking about the music of this, like the rhythm is kind of what it keeps your attention, but it's fairly basic in the sense that it repeats itself. It's not like a complicated song, chord wise or even rhythmically.
It's fast paced though.
It's fast paced, yes. It keeps its beat. In no way is it boring, but it because he's singing so much, he's almost doing slam poetry. But he's keeping like a steady beat, an active, kind of aggressive beat. And he just like it's a really good background for all of the emotion he's pouring into it. Because that chorus is the one that kind of caught my attention. I dig how awkward it is and how interestingly it fits in between the verses. Because I mean, just the way he says like while the rest of us pay, so we can work this soil. Like it doesn't land in the like it doesn't land and then give a beat and then jump into the verse. It like lands and then verse.
It doesn't. It's kind of off-putting, and I noticed that when I listened to the song. I noticed it both times, but I think that's kind of the purpose of it.
Yeah.
I think, like, especially with what he's saying, it's kind of like getting to the point. It's kind of almost getting out of the song and almost looking at you in the face and telling you this. And then it goes back to the song. That's the way I felt it, at least.
I would agree with that. But I mean, it's definitely talking about so like where I don't really have a problem with it is the notion of someone working, getting 500,000 acres, and then doing something about it, right? The issue is not being a landlord, but being a bad landlord, right? That's what it's trying to insinuate, I think.
No.
Oh, so what do you think?
Actually, David Rovics. David Rovics would say, I think I'm not speaking for David Rovics, but no, he's an anarchist.
Oh,
And so
he goes that step further.
all landlords are parasites.
In his perspective,
a lot of people, to a lot of people on the left where I reside, landlords are parasites because remember, landlords live from your paycheck to your paycheck, and it's really hard for them that they have to live from your work to your work. That's what they do. You work to pay them so you can have shelter and amenities. And like in this case in the 1840s, they like the tenant farmers there had never even seen their landlord. They just like gave their goods to the guy who came around once a year.
Okay.
And so I think David Rovics is saying all landlords are bad.
Yeah. He's coming from that perspective. I'm looking further, and so he's talking about like the Van Rensselaer family.
Rensselaers.
Yeah, Rensselaers family. And yeah, so just to kind of keep you up with this, we're talking about a Dutch family prominent during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries in the area now known as the state of New York. So yeah, we're talking about a foundational family, at least in the profiteering, or at least foundation of the state in that area. And then, yeah, I get the notion he's going for, because the idea of like a landlord, and what really kind of showed it off to me, or it kind of made it more obvious that it like the intent from my perspective was the landlord that's, disassociated from the property that he owns, like the landlord that's further distant. That's kind of where my head was going. But from his perspective, talking about like, I guess, like you said, an anarchist, he's just saying the role or perspective of a landlord is messed up.
Right. I mean, he's obviously picked landlords that really really personify the landlords that are really like bad, like if we can use bad as just a general negative term, right?
Sure, yeah.
But furthering the point, like, you can be a good person, like you can be an actual good person and do bad things
Yeah.
through a bad system.
Yeah.
So
Even good
you can
intentions,
be
right?
a good person
Yeah.
with good intentions,
Yeah.
and you can still, in many people who think like I think David Rovics thinks, you can still be a landlord.
Yeah.
So you're still doing a bad thing
Yeah.
because you are theoretically allowing the market to persuade how much you charge your tenants and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So it's like from his perspective, the idea of a landlord is just a terrible thing, and from what I would think is probably one of the reasons, because I think landlords are aware of this too, and this is why you do see some landlords trying to give in and work with and work around, but there are many more that are also working on the idea that, like, the one thing that bothered me was the idea that though evictions were not able to be done or processed, that they are still piling up at the office.
Oh, absolutely.
So that, like, the idea of pausing evictions doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. It just means that unless we do something about it and find a way to work with people, landlords and tenants included, all the above, right? I think that would be the only way that we can get around this. Unfortunately, I think that's what's happening, right? Is you have like the renters who are experiencing this strife, this issue, and you have the individuals who have, by virtue of whatever in the past, now have that rent, that landlord power, that capacity, and they have no way of really sustaining themselves now because of this. That's the idea, right? And the idea is that hopefully they're trying to look for a way to get around it, either government help or some type of policy or program. But I mean, we haven't had anything substantial come out there yet. At least not in Texas, right? I don't think in the United States either. I think we're still having this huge discussion as to what to do with this, because everybody would love to pause the game, right? Everybody would love to be able to say, hey, you know what, this is like a really crap game. Can we just pause for a couple turns? But I think that as much as people think that way for like maybe friends or small little things, it's so hard to actually do that, like at the universal scale,
The national level,
at the state level. Because I think that's the right thing that people are thinking about, that people want to happen. But it's just so hard to actually make those numbers crunch, in the way that people want them to, and especially like we've been kind of conditioned to think too in the government that we have, because there's two extremes here. You have a lot of you have conservatives, and then you have the liberal notion. So you have the bleeding heart, and then you have the only enough perspective, if that, on some things. And so it's really a hard thing to get at. Anarchist, like, so he's not even like, he's not socialist in any way, right? He's just,
No, he is a socialist. So, anarchist are socialist. Socialist is a huge umbrella term. So, he's a socialist that doesn't believe in the state. So he doesn't want a state to run the socialistic system. The socialistic system should be run by society, the people. And I am not the best person to explain.
Oh no, by
anarchism,
all means, yeah. I wanted to,
but
no.
but and I can point you to some great anarchists who could explain the system. I'm just like not one of them. But
You're good,
so
man.
I believe in a state. But I tend towards liberty over authoritarianism, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a Stalinist. I don't believe, well, the state will get us everything. We must have a state, a good, strong state. I don't believe that. But anarchists say, no, there should be no state, because
see,
the
that's
state
just
is
such a,
inherently corruptive.
oh man, that is just so. And so these are, so for anybody listening this far, right? In no way are we proclaiming to be experts on these issues. I think these concepts of political philosophy, like, they go far back in history, and not only can it mean one thing in one place in time, but there can be overarching concepts that change and adapt through time. This goes not only through this topic of socialism and anarchy and all that, but also even in capitalism and other things as well. And so in no way are we proclaiming ourselves to be experts in this, but yeah, I too would agree in saying that, no, I believe in a state. The state, I think, is due to the variant nature of reality, right? There's no way that there's some people born into this world, and there's some functions that are really hard to do on your own, and a state really should be present, especially talking about like utilities and stuff like that, right? Like day-to-day stuff. But speaking of the electric company, right, and that Roosevelt policy and stuff. But this was before we started recording, if anybody's like, what? But yeah, so I think that the state's definitely necessary, but you definitely get into this discussion as to what power the state should have, how powerful the state should be, and ultimately the left and right discussion is basically where you think power should be seated in the nation, and how strongly you believe so. And so we have pockets of infighting between the left and the right, and then fighting between them. And then even within these topics, it gets more and more intense. So what I'm trying to say is ultimately is that there's a lot of history to be spoken about. And so we're not just trying to assume or just glance over or pretend that we know everything. These philosophies just are massive. And I think that one day I would like to look into socialism a bit more to be aware of it. But no, we definitely need a state. It's just that argument of how strong of a state we should have. Basically Jeffersonian and Adams level arguments, right?
Well, yeah, which is interesting because, as you've said earlier, the left and the right, they're fighting about in the United States. We should clarify.
Yes, we should clarify.
Are fighting about how strong the government should be in what areas. So, for example, a lot of conservatives say that they're for small government, but they would also say that they're for a strong military. What is most obviously the literal arm of the government? The military. So they aren't for a small government. They're for like small social support systems.
Yeah.
But they're for a huge military.
Yep.
So they aren't for small government. You can't have you can't have a small and weak military and like say, yeah, I'm for small government. I want everything to be small and weak. They go, no, we want a strong military. Well, then you're not for small government.
Yeah.
It's just not how it works.
Well, there's a lot of stuff like that, like where ultimately a lot of people say one thing and do another, and you kind of view yourself through one prism, but it's ultimately a lot of different things. Because I would say the same thing, not same thing, but I would say that you find that on all spectrums of politics, where especially in that context, you say one thing, but then there's points to prove the opposite. And I think also it's just that people don't really know what they believe. A lot of people don't know what tenets they believe by, or what things are most important to them. A lot of individuals just live in their daily life inside this schema that other people have kind of made for them, right? This government, whether state or federal. But I think this song really kind of captures a frustration. It captures a frustration. It captures a few really, really good points that I just, when I heard them, I was like, okay, like that's a really nice twist on that. Where like at the end of the song, where he goes like, the governor passed laws to try and stop them, but nothing could be done to break their will. And by 1848, the landlords buckled and sold other holdings to farmers in the hills, right? And then it switches and shows that the system changed, but it ultimately is still the same, right? It's one of those old like history tenets, right? That things change, but they still always stay the same.
Yep.
And so you have that speculators and banks now, and you still have homeless people struggling, right? That's unfortunately a thing that we do see here, and we do see a lot of, when you look like in history, you just see a lot of echoes. You see a lot of echoes.
Indeed.
I think the song is really timely, and this is coming from like a layman. And when I heard it the two times, and I went to sit down to look at the lyrics, it was kind of eye raising a little bit, just because it's in a lot of ways it's simply said. But reading some of the lyrics, it reminds me of people that I know are in similar situations, if not dire so, and it just makes me think of them, so
yeah, you have an idea or a person that comes to mind, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah, I definitely do.
And that's the thing that I think one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because like so Will and I have had the pleasure of just randomly meeting, usually over cigars or something, or a cigarette, and just having really interesting conversations. And I know a little bit about history, but I love talking about history around Will, because Will usually knows a lot more, at least more than I do. And I mean, these songs have been a constant thing, and every time we talk about some of these songs, I really feel like it gives you a different picture of things. It gives you, I mean, because you have this man passionately singing this stuff. It's not like he is whistling Dixie, right? He's not just, playing around and just having some fun. I mean, he's kind of making a statement, and like you said, plainly said, almost feels like he has someone in mind too, like it's just really intense, and that kind of goes to the theme too. Sorry,
he sings it with such a vigor. It was kind of hard not to listen to it again.
Yeah.
Can I make a recommendation for another one of David Rovics' songs?
Yes, please do.
We won't maybe discuss on this episode with y'all, but maybe sometime in the future. He wrote a song called "Iceland Told the Bankers," and it's about the Great Recession, and all the banks across the globe all went into a crunch, and debts were called, and all these terrible things happened, yada yada. And the nation of Iceland, the people, told the bankers to F off. They said, "We're just not going to pay it. Bye." And the bankers went, "What do you mean you're just not going to pay it? We're not going to pay it. You've got a debt that we didn't make. You made it. You made bad decisions, and we're just not going to do anything about it. You're gonna fail, and we're gonna be fine." And they went, "No, but you have to. You have to help us." And they went, "No, we really don't."
And that's
the whole world looked at Iceland and went, "What are you doing, man? You have to bail out. You have to bail out the bankers. It's what we do. It's how we have a stable society." And Iceland said, "No, we actually don't, and we won't, and we're gonna be fine." And here's the secret, everybody. They were fine.
And that's
now,
kind
it's
of
Iceland. It's not the most
I was about to
populated
say,
country
yeah,
and
I was
all
going
that
to say,
jazz, but they were fine.
Yes, it is a vivid case, and it's something that we could use to explore it more further. But that's the trouble I have with some of those cases. Although I don't disagree, right? I don't disagree that this could be an option, but I disagree with some of the cases, because I always find myself feeling similar when I talk about like the Netherlands or like the Swiss, when we're talking about the idea of like happiness studies. When we talk about happiness studies and things of that nature, they're like, "Oh, things are going great, and these programs work great over there." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's like a pinky toe in comparison to like what we're talking about in the United States." Now, doesn't mean it couldn't work with modifications for said population, right? But that's why I always like stop myself when someone says, "Well, it worked over there." I'm like, "Okay, you're not wrong," but again, pinky toe, pinky toe over the entire U.S. I find it hilarious. But it could work. The one thing that makes me intrigued as well is like those prison reform stuff as well that we see in the Netherlands. Things that work over there, I do wonder if they could work over here, for sure. Jeez, dude, when did that happen? Do you know? We got the Googles. We got the Googles. Iceland.
What exactly? The Iceland? Okay. I mean, it took a while. It wasn't like overnight. 2009?
2008?
2009, something like that.
Damn.
Because the unfolding of it took a while. Like it wasn't like, "Oh no, economic crash next day." Let the banks deal with their own business. It was like, "Oh, what do we do?" Well, several months later, yeah, we're not going to help you, because you made
bad investment decisions.
You engaged in speculation. You made bad investments. You gave bad loans, and we think you ought to deal with it yourself.
Yeah,
you made those decisions.
That's one of the things that they say they want to switch in the United States is like, rather than profiting the investor class, right? people would like the working party or the working peoples to be the ones who experience more of that levity and more of that prosperity. But it's so hard, man. I love talking about political philosophy, but I always end up getting entrenched in this. Not entrenched, but I end up saying, man, these freaking systems are entrenched. But it is good to talk about them.
Oh yeah. And we were talking about, the transition from a feudal system that these tenant farmers were working, and even today we still have a one-sided system where speculators and bankers are prospering off of our own wealth and all that. And this song, Iceland Told the Bankers, is, I think, maybe a good one to listen to after that.
For
So
sure.
if our listeners, uh, you know,
Are curious
go and
enough.
listen to Landlord, then you listen to Iceland Told the Bankers, and well, now you've listened to 2 David Rovics songs. You ought to listen to a couple of others. He's really fun.
He is. I like the energy he brings. Now, I will, like I said to Todd, there's some elements, and I think this is going to be the truth about any political song or song with a message in nature. Is that I often agree with some things and disagree with others. I don't necessarily, like I said, anarchist. I can't agree with the whole notion of all landlords are bad, but I can definitely agree with the notion that some and obvious examples exist where landlords are bad, and it's something that we should work against. Maybe that argument would have been less valid earlier, right? But now I think it becomes a bit more present, a bit more weighted. At least I think so. Wait, we jump into the next song?
We can.
You got anything to say, Todd? You want anything on your mind?
I think I probably have more to say with the next one, and probably bits that I can compare to the first song we just talked about.
All right, Will, what's our next song? I think we're going to Mr. Utah, right?
Yeah, Utah Phillips.
Yes.
Larimer Street.
Yeah, Larimer Street. And this one's really, so again, I'll probably play a little bit of a clip.
And where will I go? And where can I stay? You knock down the skid road and haul it away. I'll flag a fast rattler and ride it on down, boys. They're running the bums, yeah, they're running the bums out of town.
But it's really interesting to listen to this one. I found the energy from this one to be a lot more relaxed, a lot more calm. But I just found it to be seemed really honest, and it seemed like a perspective he had lived. Because you can just kind of tell, it just feels like something he lived.
Well, he talks about it being, assuming, it is in first person. He talks about being a part of his town, and he's seeing everything kind of change. And I think the one thing that got me in particular, the one piece, I think it's the middle of the song, which says, you ran out the hookers who worked on the street, but built a new club where the playboys can meet. And, and that kind of reminds me of kind of the end of let me see where I can find it here. Oh, God, I had it highlighted of Landlord, where I talk about, near the end where I talk about, switching, basically just transfer over that power to banks and speculators. And it's like, well, these people were kind of making a living.
Yeah.
And just came in and obviously taxed the crap out of them and took control of it. So it's, goes back to saying, what actually changed? You replaced something, but nothing actually changed.
Sorry. I'm back. I just had to do something real quick. But no, I agree. I feel like it definitely did something in the sense, like, it almost takes part where David Rovics kind of like left off, and this is kind of like what feels like the daily and or like, I guess, first person account of it. Especially talking about like old Maxie the tailor closing down his doors, right? The one that got me, that kind of hurt me, especially now, talking about like the old Chinese cafe that was open all night. I was like, my heart hurts, because I really loved going places late at night and just kind of chilling there. And I can imagine kind of how frustrating that would be to not have that ability anymore.
And with that line, you can go to a cafe and buy a cup of coffee, and they can't kick you out because you are a patron.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the night, when it's late, you can go to somewhere and be warm or
Yep.
cool, depending on where you are in the United States.
Yeah.
Buy a cup of coffee, and for a short amount of time, have some calm because you aren't on the street. Well, now that's gone,
Yeah.
and so are the bars.
Yep.
And
I love the line about counterfeit hippies and their plastic
yeah.
boutiques.
Now, doesn't that just sound like Austin?
It does. It does.
Doesn't all of this song in a lot of strange ways describe Austin?
I feel
or
like it does.
Parts of Houston, or parts of Dallas, or New York, or Chicago, any place
major
that's
city
experiencing gentrification.
Yep. I do want to add so we are talking about so there's a line, right? It says kind of go to the choruses. And where will I go and where will I stay? Right, you knock down the skid row and hauled it away. I'll flag a fast rattler and ride it down on down, boys. Like they're running the bums out of town. So when I say the word bum, I'm using literally his nomenclature there. The idea of bums in a town not being treated right, not being treated with that basic decency. I could say that during the protests that we had here in Austin, there was actually a few vivid cases where during some frustration, some homeless individuals, like their tents were destroyed or like some of their property was destroyed. And you do see both sides of this, because there's definitely a part of any city that just has a huge distaste and distrust for the homeless population. In some examples, valid, right? But overall, maybe not so much. And you do see other individuals who just kind of try to help out, because there was this one homeless man who had his tent destroyed, and like the very next morning, someone bought him a new tent. And so I find it interesting about like the whole back and forth, because definitely not everybody feels this way, but there is a good part of cities that are just very willing to push people out just because they don't like seeing them.
I'll add that I'm going to go back to my escapades in Seattle.
Go for it.
The first time I went in 2013, I had already been told by friends, and it was my first time seeing some of these people and obviously visiting the state, no less the city. And they told me, hey, like, you're new here. Just I was told a couple places to because I was going to be walking most of the times. I wanted to walk in Seattle. And I said, hey, just avoid certain areas at these times of day. Right. And then the thing is, our first the place that we stayed at was right next to this park that I guess had was infamous. And I didn't see anything. I didn't have any trouble, but it was very clear to me during the day, there were so many people, especially younger people, that were homeless. Just and they were mixing into the crowds on the streets. But I think back then, my friends who are actual Seattleites thought of it very differently. And then last year when I visited, I think there was more sympathy for these people, from the people in town, and less sympathy for the fact that Amazon had come in and totally changed everything about that city. And it was so interesting seeing that change, even seeing people's temperament just completely different. The drivers, my Uber drivers were always talking about it, like, oh, everything changed when Amazon came in.
Oh wow!
And so I know they have a rather large homeless population, and so do other places like Los Angeles, right?
Oh yeah.
But as someone who doesn't actually, in my part of Texas, I see a little bit of that here and there, but also I don't live in a walking city. So once I was actually able to be in a place where this was more prevalent, it's very eye opening.
It is, and I think it's something that we have to talk about. Anybody coming to visit Austin or coming to visit anywhere around town, a big place like this, I kind of got to have the conversation with them too. Is just like, hey, like this is a reality of life, and it's the discussion about how one gets there is one thing. But how we treat individuals who are in that time of life or experiencing that is another. And it is really curious to see how each city does it, and each different part of the city does it too, right? Gentrification, right? The main word there is unfortunate. Yeah.
And that's because I had been for years, I had been wanting to, I'd like the idea of moving there. And then year after year, especially last year, it just didn't seem like a place that I wanted to be in anymore, and not because of the homeless population, but just because of all of the um, just the blanket, of this giant corporation coming in and kind of just forcing people out and stuff. It was really sad. A lot of businesses were closing. Places that I had eaten years before that I loved, holes in the wall. With a grandmother in the back. They're all gone.
Yeah.
And it was really sad. I came back very somber last August.
There is a disenchantment that happens. I will say I felt that with Austin. Is that I do enjoy Austin. I love Central Texas. I feel like it's the most at home I can feel in Texas. Is probably some combination of Austin, Houston, but more Austin right now. And there is having riding the bus every morning, going to work downtown. Definitely give me a different view of things. I never felt like I was in danger on the bus or around individuals who were homeless. There were definitely some people who you saw that their mental health kind of put them there, that there's a part of the population that's veterans and people who have that it's not about decisions you've made, but kind of things that have kind of occurred. And so there's some really interesting people who are homeless, just want to have a conversation, just want to be treated like a citizen, like a part of the town. And then there are some people who, do have a chip on their shoulder and they're definitely going through something. But there's no reason to kind of, the whole idea of where would you go, it's got to be kind of a sad notion. What are your thoughts on this, Will?
Well, to kind of piggyback off of something you said, that people just want to have a conversation. I was in Austin at UT doing some research, and it came time to leave. So of course you hit the famous Austin traffic, which starts at 3:45 in the afternoon and ends at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
going in or out. And so you hit that wall, and I'm on the university, and I'm trying to get on to 35, and there's a homeless dude with a sign asking for money. I had a couple bucks, so I said, you know what, this guy needs it. I've got it. I'll just give it to him. So I roll down my window. I yell, "Hey, buddy!" He comes over, and I can have a full conversation with this guy because the traffic isn't moving. Like it's not like, oh, I've got to make this fast because the light's going to turn green and I got to go. No. It's wall to wall. You just
you just got to wait.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. I talked to this guy, and I creeped up a little bit at a time, and I'd be like, hey, I got to move up a little bit. Meet me over there. Just anyway. And I told, I don't remember his name. I don't even know that we exchanged names. But he goes, "Oh man, are you from Austin?" I go, "No, I'm from South Texas. I live in San Marcos." He goes, "Oh man, I love San Marcos. I used to go down there with my dog and we'd play in the river." And I was like, this guy loved a dog that, by the way, I don't think was living anymore.
Yeah,
but he has such a fond memory of his dog in San Marcos. They're people.
Yeah, they
happen to be homeless.
Yep.
And some of them are homeless for various reasons, and
some self-imposed, and then others not.
Yeah, so some of them are eternal wanderers, nomads of this world.
Am I using the word right? Vagabond.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah. So I mean,
Todd, vagabond, correct word? Question mark?
It sounds. I think for some people that would sound a little vicious. I think for me, I think that's an okay word to use.
Yeah, like defining it just to make sure. Vagabond, right? Person who wanders from place to place. But like the word ignorance, I feel like vagabond has a negative connotation.
A little sting to it.
Yeah. But no, yeah, vagabond. Just there's some people who do just like to move from town to town, free-spirited individuals. There are some people who choose the homeless life. It's for some people it could be really hard to imagine that that's the case. But it is. There are some people who do choose that life. There are people who want to get out of it, who fell into it. There are people who accept it. I mean, I always talk about this all the time, but going on the bus in Austin taught me so much about the everyday person living in Austin, and walking to lunch downtown, going to areas off 6 to get some food. You just come across some interesting walks of life. And yes, as always, there's usually there is that very angry homeless individual, right? I have had my window beat while I'm in a Lyft heading home, and I'm trying to get home for the weekend. I'm out early, and my driver turns in, and this homeless person's not happy with her, and we're in traffic, and they beat on my window. Like, this happens, but we can't let like certain individuals pollute our minds to everybody, because like we talked about landlords, right? Like we talked about all these other populations. Invariably, there are good people there. And we should endeavor to try and, not, I know any conservative listening would say, don't give anything away, but it's more of like allow the steps to return, right? That's something.
I think we're kind of veering off a little bit because I keep looking at the song, but you keep talking about this, and it kind of reminds me of the story. And I might have told you before, John, on my previous workplace, I had this gentleman,
I think so, but yeah,
I won't name out of respect.
Sure.
A gentleman that when I started working there, I was opening with frequency, and he had already had a history with my coworkers who had been there for some time. And he would come in the mornings, and he had this little phone, this broken flip phone, half broken flip phone. He could barely read the screen, and he didn't have the glasses for it either. His glasses were beat to hell. And he came in one morning. He saw me. He's like, "You're new. Is it okay if I just plug in my phone in the corner right there next to the counter?" I'm like, I didn't know who he was, but it was very clear to me that he had done this often. I'm like, yeah, you can, as long as you're not bothering me, you're not doing anything, plug in your phone, that's fine. In fact, I plug it in myself. People that come in here plug it in all the time. Just go ahead and plug it in. And he was part of my morning routine just as often as the UPS man would come in the mornings.
Oh, wow.
Every morning he would come in to charge his phone. It was his moment of respite, for the clearly long night that he had, because he didn't have anywhere to go. And I didn't expect to see this man often. I thought, like, well, maybe this is like a, every once in a while, but he was constantly there. And I would have conversations with him. And at some point, a couple months into these conversations, and then it was the holiday season, he kind of he was willing to share everything because he had found some kind of trust in me, and not just me, another coworker of mine or two. And it was a really sad situation. He had lived here before. He was doing really well. He had a career in IT, and him and his wife decided to do some traveling. And in that traveling, they kind of got stuck. Some details I obviously won't share. He had an immediate death in the family. His significant other unfortunately divorced him in the process, and he was kind of left stranded. And in that process, he traveled to parts of the state just by hitchhiking, made his way back here, and realized he had nothing. He didn't have his ID. There's obviously a lot of holes here in the story. I'm just kind of going around to prove a point. But I was able to sit down and have chats with this man. He would never ask for anything from me. He never asked me for anything. He never asked anyone that would come in for anything. I thought after a couple of days, I'm like, okay, he might eventually start asking people for, just for a little bit of money, which I wouldn't have blamed him for. But he never did. And yet whenever he was able to have a meal, he would actually come in, and he would come in and come up to the side counter and say, "Todd, do you want a piece of this?" And it always baffled me because I'm thinking, man, you don't have anything. And for me, it's very easy. Thankfully, at the time, it was very easy for me to just go on break and just go grab a burger or go home and make myself a meal. And he's here with nothing and offering me half of his food. And so, kind of going back to what you were talking about, some of these people just want to have a conversation, just want to be treated normally. All these people want to be treated normally, I would imagine. And I think it's part of the stigma that comes with it. Like, oh, they put themselves in this situation. And sometimes it's just, that may be the case, but in some cases it's not. They're just, given the bad card.
The bad end of the stick,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the end of that story, but I'll just add that he eventually was able to get some assistance. And right before anything that happened this year, in January, he was able to get a job.
Nice.
And he was able to get assistance to get an apartment. I was really happy, and yet he still came back to visit.
Yeah, because it's that connection.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely something that stuck with me, and it always, I think it has further opened me up to be more empathetic than I already am.
As you want to just make that connection.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I was willing to kind of take on, like, or want to take on these songs. I feel like they hit on major things, kind of leaning into why I really enjoy having these chats with Will, because Will just tends to be like, oh, well, here's some food for thought. Like, Will just kind of pops in and just kind of drops this and like, all right, well, have a good day.
And then I often leave. I mean, I often go, hey, have you ever thought about this? No? Well, that's nice. And then I'm out of there.
Yep.
You know?
And that's,
and you're just going, what? Oh, bugger.
I got some thinking to do.
What to do with this.
And it's always so great because like, we're talking about these major things, right? Talking about the idea of the landlord, right? And obviously not saying and vilifying all landlords, but the concept of a landlord is troubling to some political views, and that's what we're bringing up. And in this context, it makes sense to discuss, and especially the homeless population. Anyone listening in the Valley, anyone listening at Corpus or at Kingsville, where this might be heard, your experiences of homelessness might not be as intense, but as soon as you go to a bigger city, San Antonio, Austin, especially Houston, Dallas, it's just a different experience.
Well, I mean, urban and rural homelessness are, I mean, yeah, they both have the same initial issues, like, where am I going to stay? What am I going to eat? What do I do? But if you're in an urban setting, there's people.
Yeah.
And they are a resource and an obstacle. But there's also buildings and infrastructure, overpasses. There's places that you can get out of the rain so you won't catch a cold. I mean, if you're in a rural area and you just are suddenly homeless,
there's not much.
You have land. So you've got to kind of get to a town, not even like an urban environment, just a town
that has any type of spot where
like if the like the biggest where I went to school, there was like the high school, a Dairy Queen, and then just like a convenience store, and then town, like houses where people lived. There just wasn't much. Like, if anyone was homeless, I wouldn't know what they would do. I have no idea. Churches, I guess you could go to the churches and try to get help. But
I think that, but even then, their resources would probably be very minimal. I mean,
oh yeah,
because
they're small town churches. They
exactly.
don't have funds.
Exactly, and that's the craziness about these topics is that, like, they all have variant levels of experience, and there's different ways to discuss them. Is there a landlord that's nice? Yes. Is there a homeless individual who's mean? Sure. But there are these, you can't let these individuals become monoliths of that topic, right? You can't let the good landlord let you to believe that all landlords are inclined to be nice, and that we should expect as such, right? And you can't let the idea of experiencing, maybe one bad experience with someone who's homeless lead you to believe that all individuals are like that. And mind you, man, like, I got like a crazy, like, homelessness story for you if you'd care to hear it.
By all means.
So like, we were in Austin, and I was probably there for the first, maybe this was during the first 3 months I was there, tail end of 2018, and I'm there. I get a job downtown with a coworker. Him and I kind of work in a very small office. So we thought, hey, let's go get some drinks in the town. Let's go ahead and take one of the buses. And the blue buses in town are pretty smooth, pretty chill. Because usually, especially during 8 to 5, they're residential folk, people going into work, coming out from work. Very usually safe crowd. Nothing really to worry about. But on the weekends, you get everybody on that bus, right? And you get a real mixed population. So there's also a red line that moves through more speedy and longer distances around the area. So speaking of that individual who went to San Marcos to play with their dog, they probably went down there on a bus, right? Now, we had gone, had some drinks, had some fun time. It was a Saturday, so we were having fun on a Saturday when you could do this. And thinking back, wow, I definitely miss going out. But we were coming back. We decided to call it. It was like maybe 6, 7. We had started kind of early, so it was like 6, 7. We just took the bus to head home, And we get on this bus, and him and I are just kind of in our zone, you know, coming down from a few drinks. And this is the weirdest thing to discuss, and at the end of this story, I might end up censoring it depending on how weird it is. But like, there are 3 varying levels of homelessness on the bus. You know, 3 people at differing levels, right? What I mean by this is that I'm assuming by their dress, right? By what they're wearing and their vernacular and what they're using and their comfortability. You have one individual who feels like he's lived a long time homeless. A guy who feels like he's comfortable in this culture, but he still is not as attuned or has the same assumptions as the first guy. And I swear, you got a guy who I feel like fell on his luck like 3 weeks ago.
Ugh.
You know, and I'm like, I'm like, okay, all right. So I have a varying array of this population here, but my friend and I kind of look at each other and we're like, hey, live and let live. I'm not going to say anything about these gents, but they are having a passionate conversation. All right. And they're talking about, this is where it's going to get weird. They're like, if we don't do this, I'm not trying to hear too much, right? They're like, if we don't do this, then the Russians are going to get you. And you don't want the Russian mad at you. And I just look at my friend. I'm like, the Russian? Like, what's going on here, right? Huh? And he's like, yeah, but I don't care about the Russian. It's the German you got to be worried about. I'm just like, okay. Obviously, there's more to this story that I don't want to know, but I am so curious. But then this is where it gets like intense. Is like, so we're just kind of there, and the way it is that the bus has like, you know, sideways seats. So you think the bus has forward fronting seats, and they do have that, forward seated seats, but they have side seats to where you can look at each other, right? And we were there. I was on the left side, they were on the right side, and they're just kind of talking to each other, talking smack, you know, across all 3 levels of experience. And this is where it gets really like, what the hell? Like, one of the guys just kind of says like, hey, like, you know, could I, what do you say? Is like, could one of you gentlemen buy me a gun?
Whoa.
And I was like, nah. Like, I just like very quickly, like not like nonchalantly, the city had kind of taken on me already. So I didn't react to this oddly, you know? I just kind of like, no, nah, man. Like, I'm not gonna do any of that. And the guy doesn't say anything. He's like, all right, man, whatever, I'll leave you alone. Like, he just looks at my friend and he says like, hey, can you get me a gun? And my friend looks at me and I look at him like, of course, free country. I'm getting off at the next stop. You do whatever the hell you want to do. And he's like, no, hell no. Like, no. And he just kind of like does the same thing I did. Just like, no, thank you. Done with this conversation. You know, do your thing. No judgment. Stay away from me. Especially when the topic of a gun comes up, right? And then the guy just freaking says like, he says, whatever, don't worry about it. Like, it'll disappear by morning. You'll be at the bottom of the lake. And I just like, all right. I think I might have just had my fill for like this entire interaction. And I walk out of that, right? I leave there and I look at my friend and I say, we're going home and we don't have to talk about this on Monday, but I'm going to tell you, we're going to look at the news, and I'm almost certain something stupid's going to happen around where we just got dropped off. And sure enough, on the Monday, there was something that happened off of that corner where we got picked up, not dropped off, where we got picked up, and there was a shooting in that area that night, or like some night.
Oh.
And I just remember looking, and my friend had the same perspective. He was like, those are not like that. That's not everybody. But we did have like, there is something behind people's fears of some individuals, but has nothing to do with necessarily homelessness, right? It's about the type of person you are and the vibe you're on and the people you surround yourself with. And I honestly felt bad for that third guy, right? Because like the first guy, I can't do anything. You're living this life, right? The second guy, kind of the same thing. You're not going to listen to me. But the guy that was like fighting with them, trying to calm everything down, you know, was the third guy. You know, the guy who was like, what's up with y'all? Why y'all doing this? And I just got off that bus like kind of with a new perspective of just saying, you know, homelessness isn't necessarily like homeless people aren't bad. But there are bad people in every strata. And I came close face to face with what probably was a very bad man. At least with the jokes that he was making. And so so
nonchalantly.
No, I know. And I'm gonna bus. I forget to tell you that there's a couple to the immediate left of us in between all this, and they're just like they must have
Terrified.
lived. No. They must have lived in the city so damn long, Todd, that they were just like looking forward.
So numb to it.
They didn't even recognize what was said. They were just like, okay, like
completely shut out of their minds. They're like, we're just gonna get home. This bus is gonna take us to the next stop, and we're gonna be off, and it's gonna be fine. Who cares?
Yeah, and I say that story to say this is that, like, yes, there are bad people in every strata, but I think thinking about those people who fall in with a bad crowd, who are desperate for any type of comfort when they first fall into like homelessness, no, those crowds do exist, and you should always keep your wits about you. But when we're talking about, from what I hear about this song and stuff, is like, be careful of your presumptions, right? Homeless people aren't bad, and kicking them out of the city isn't necessarily good.
Because they have to go somewhere.
Yeah, that's
the thing.
Yeah,
It's not like, oh well, if we kick the homeless people out, we won't have them. No, they just go somewhere else, and they go somewhere else where they aren't going to have any support system, because the places they're going to go have never had them in the quantity that they're going to have them. So now, oh well, Austin homeless people, they've had them forever. Yeah, no, they have, exactly. Thank you. And therefore, since they've had them for such a long time, they have developed things, systems, organizations
yeah,
to help them.
yeah.
And you can't help everybody, right?
No,
like,
yeah.
okay, fine, you can't help everybody and the way things work. But like,
Where
if
bottom
they
lines
were
are
to,
concerned.
if all of them were to show up in my town right now, we would, like, every incredibly minor organization that we have in my town would buckle, because like,
just don't have the
we have
capacity.
a food pantry, and there's some churches that have a little bit of money for this kind of thing, but like, we couldn't deal with it because we've never dealt with it.
Yeah, and it's so weird how closely the different SESs live together. Because, mind you, like, if you've ever been to 6th Street in Austin, I'm not talking about a faraway place. I'm talking about 2 streets up. I'm talking about 8th Street. You know what I mean? Where you have, individuals, or maybe even us street up, right? 7th and 8th, where you have the what's it called? The shelter, right? Like, and I always found that so crazy how, pre-COVID, right? Like, maybe a little bit now, but pre-COVID especially, where you'd have South by Southwest, some of the most affluent, people, some of the biggest monies moving around. You have all like celebrities and all these things just going down on 6th Street and around Austin. But then within a block and a half, 2 blocks, you have like the poorest population watching some of the richest population enjoy themselves. And there's no way is it saying, take away from people to give to others who haven't earned it, if that's the perspective you may have. For some people that may be true, but it's not for everybody. And no matter what you say, these different cultures still live next to each other. And having drinks on 6th Street, it never missed me, man. Like, you go to some of these cool bars, you have to pass some people along the way, That's one of the things that always tripped me out about like bar life in Austin, is that you go out for a drink and then you look around, and it's like, some people can easily enjoy themselves down there, but after a while I start to think about the why of 6th Street. And it just bugs me a bit, because I'm like, man, there's so many people making a lot of money here, and then you have these poor people just kind of like rummaging through it. It reminds me of Progreso at times, Todd.
Yes.
Where you for those who don't know, this is a Mexican town right across the border from Texas, and it's just a lot of money pours into there, and there's a lot of people making a lot of money there, but there is a huge poverty population there.
It's massive. Yeah.
Massive.
You guys have been to it more than I have, but
yeah,
it's definitely visible.
Last time I went, dude, I went like 3 years ago, and or 2 years ago, and it really messes with your head. But you're right, Will. They gotta go somewhere, or at the very least, there has to be. If we're gonna have this population, we have to find a way to better work with them. And yes, there are people who choose that life. There are people who rebel against the system, right? But then there has to be a good population of people who they want that redemption story, right?
Right. And but see, even the people who chose to not be tied down and chose to be wanderers and nomads still have to eat.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And like and I know you don't mean this, but I hear this from people fairly often. Well, a lot of them chose this life. And what? That means they should starve? And it's
Yeah,
like
that's the
this
issue.
it's like this moral thing of like, well, I don't give them money because they chose that. And if you chose to be, dirty and homeless, then I'm not going to give you any money. Well, so they deserve to starve because maybe 95% of the time they're good. Maybe they know how to get food and they know how to find shelter and all of that. 95% of the time.
Very
That
industrious
means
people in
like
that
maybe
sense.
they're very industrious. Exactly. They know how to get what they need and they know what they need. But 5% of the time they can't. I'm no mathematician, but somebody out there can do the math on like how many days in a year 5% is, and what if all those 5% are clustered near each other? That's a lot of time without like food
Yeah.
and shelter.
Well, it's one of the things that bugs me. Like one of the things that really got to me when one time I was down on 6th Street, and like this one kind of hurts me too, where it was like as a police officer, right? So a police officer has to be involved in this, right? Because we give them all the problems that nobody wants to handle, right? So as much as there are issues against police officers, I know that again, same thing. There are good ones, and I think this one was kind of put in a hard rock and a hard place type stuff, because he had gotten complaints about a dog that was like malnourished and not being taken care of, right? Well, it's malnourished because the owner is a homeless man. And it looks like the homeless man himself isn't eating much, and he's not really able to give much food to his dog, right, given his current context. And so it looks like the police officer has to pick up the dog because I think, especially in Austin, right, it's like dogs are citizens too. And so like the fact that a dog is malnourished and people are complaining about it, the cop's going to do something about it. So the cop takes the pet away from the homeless man, which I in my mind was just having a hard time understanding, because like I was like, the guy probably tries to feed his dog, right? And maybe just can't, given the resources he doesn't have. And it just kind of sucks that he falls in such a hard time, right, that his pet's removed, which probably brought him some like satisfaction, I'm sure, as a pet does. And it was just a hard thing to watch, because you could just tell that the cop wasn't happy that he had to do this. He wasn't enjoying it, but he obviously had a task to do. And it was just a really hard thing to watch, like that individual, basically cry out for his dog. But the dog was damn near emaciated. So it's like there are these really hard cases, but we need to provide some sort of avenue up and out, I think, to kind of give some sense of at least some help, for that 5% time we're talking about, things of that nature. You know what I mean? With how much food moves around this nation at a time, right? I don't think that there's any reason why. I mean, I think it's real hard to starve as a homeless man in the United States. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, especially talking about 5% of the time, right? Will, I felt like you were going to say something.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that that homeless man had a dog and they were both on hard times, and a concerned citizen called the police
for the dog
to and this is a really layered thing. They called the police to do something about this dog because the dog was clearly not eating much, right?
Yeah.
They called the police. Okay, already they're pushing they're pushing ownership of their own feelings off to another individual. Well, I have to call the police to deal with something I feel about, therefore the police can handle it.
Yeah.
And the police's answer is, of course, to take the dog away. To get
The only
dog
thing,
food.
the only thing in
to,
there.
to get the dog food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But not.
That's so instead of them getting the dog food, which would be the way to solve the problem, really, they call the police to first take the dog away so the dog can get food.
Yeah. Rather than providing
Secondly,
food.
the police are also being told by maybe even not this person, other people, that they want the homeless man and people like him, the homeless, removed from the city
So
because they're a problem.
Yeah, that is a movement in the city.
But they're pets we need to save.
Yep. This is the clash.
The dog is more important than the human because the dog, it's just a dog. It doesn't choose anything. It is this being that must be treasured and held and helped. But the human, the person, we need to push out because they're an eyesore.
Well, that's the
dog
thing.
is an eyesore, and we feel emotional attachment to it. Therefore, we must feed it and make it better. The person is an eyesore, and we will not feed it. We will not feed him, and we will push him out of society and hopefully out of town.
It's this Puritan.
Isn't that strange?
It is. I was listening to a moral psychology text, the same one that I just recently gave to you, actually, Todd.
Yes.
And so, talking about, I think it's called Righteous Minds. It's by Jonathan Haidt. And so, but yeah, no, talking about how, we talking about morality and how we do things. Like, the morality things is so messed up. We really kind of pull from, I think it's puritanical in the notion of work ethic. Is that correct, Will? Do you know? I think
we have in the United States, we certainly have a slightly altered, but idea of, you have to have a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
And that the Puritans certainly thought that Protestants more broad,
maybe that's what I was going for.
Out to Protestants, there's the myth, I'm doing air quotes now, you can't see me, that America was founded on strong Protestant work ethic.
Yeah.
Which, is bad history, but it is a belief. I mean, people believed this and they still do.
I think that's where it comes from. I think that the idea there is that the dog didn't do anything to deserve his placement, but people presume that the man did. And now I do have to say that this individual was seated in front of a shelter. So in some sense, he was getting looked after by society, but one just seemed more swift. Like one just seemed more obvious, and it's just more obviously focused on. And that's one of the things that kind of there's to kind of put this on you, Todd, to get you into things that I kind of wrestled with, right? Is I would take a bus into town. I would leave the apartment by about like 6:50, 7 o'clock, and I'm walking through traffic to get to the bus, and I take the bus and I go into town.
Right.
When you go into town, like downtown, I started noticing that all these ledges and all of these like shelves spots in front of windows. I started noticing that all these spots had spikes, and I was like, "What's that for?"
It's to prevent people from lingering, finding shelter in the rain. Anything.
Yep. And that's one of the things that got me too. Is I heard about it, and I remember someone told me, "Oh, it's for the birds."
Huh.
Like someone's like, it's for the animals. So like,
you don't need to drive away a bird with a spike.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. And then one day, on a cold day when I was leaving work, I could swear I saw someone put like cardboard over them, or put like something on top of it, and they were just like, if I don't lean too hard,
Yeah, if I don't lean too hard, I can stay out of the rain.
Yeah.
I have to stay still.
Exactly. And that's when I just I was confronted with this cognitive dissonance that we have with the homelessness topic. And that's something that just kind of became like ridiculously obvious to me. Was when you see stuff like that. Now, of course, private business, individuals can make their own choice, how they want to decorate their spots for whatever reason, right? But it just
barbaric decoration.
it painted an interesting image, right? And I always just found it so odd that I walk in and there's a cafe with some coffee and you get a donut and everything, and there's lawyers and powerful people moving around, and everyone's like, "Oh, good morning. Oh, thank you. Yes, here's that, and then homeless person walks by, and some people are nice and others are just like give them an evil eye, and others are way more motivated to say shit. And it's a mixed bag when you get to the city, and if you look hard enough, you can see what the city's tried to do to already kind of push some of these people out. And it's happening with rent too. I mean, the rent's so freaking high that it's hard. I mean, you are going to have a hard time finding rent in Austin for less than $1,000. And if it is less than $1,000, then you're going to notice that it is less than $1,000. You notice why.
Rent. Yeah.
And like even outside here, like I'm a few cities away from Austin, still close enough, part of Austin Metro. And even here the rent's up. And so you start to wonder, why are there so many people who are homeless? It was like, well, look at the rent rates and look how things have skyrocketed with changes of population in Austin and stuff like that.
One line that I keep coming back to in the song that we were talking about at some point,
and we still are on the topic, just not.
I know we are. We just haven't got back to the song, and I have it right in front of me. And I think about the spikes. I think about the gentleman who was at the place I was working at, or any of these people that we've talked about. The gentleman who lost his dog. One of the lines in the song is, "And where will I go, and where can I stay?" Because everything's changing in this man's town. Places that were usually places of comfort, like you said, you can go to this shop in the middle of the night, and as long as you buy, a water or a coffee, you are safe. You are in this moment of warmth or cold wherever you are in the United States, like Will said. And once you drive people out and you make it difficult for them, where are they going to go?
Yeah, there's no
we don't have that structure in place. Maybe some cities do, but around here that's not the case.
Yeah, and frankly, I think the truth is that people either move away or they die off. They either find a way to compensate, or they don't. I mean, I think that the very real survival of the fittest thing that a lot of people try to harken back to, like, oh, think of human beings when we're survival of the fittest and under all that type of pressure. I'm like, well, I mean, just look at the homeless population. I mean, the homeless population might not be running away from a freaking saber-toothed cat, but, they are hit by so many stressors and trying to make, it's like, I think most people might only really understand the whole pursuit of happiness thing of trying to go from one shelter to another. Right.
Right.
But it's just really curious. Real quick, I'm going to do a quick check. Will, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Yeah. Discord did a thing. It jumped in and then jumped out, and John was no one was talking. So I said something, but then John was talking.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, did I just talk over somebody with a completely different thought? It was quite strange.
No, you're good. On our side, we didn't hear anything. So
okay, well, Discord did a weird thing.
I believe it.
So I was gonna say, and I lost the exact trail of thought there for a second. Sorry if something was said, but the lyric in the song that I think helps summarize a lot of what we've been talking about. The spikes, the various, injustices, whether large or small, against homeless people, is now I'm finding out there's just one kind of war. It's the one going on between the rich and the poor.
Yeah.
And I guess that I don't know a lot about class, but the upper and middle can all kiss my edited out expletive deleted as it were.
Yes.
But you can all kiss it. And I the rest of this song is, it's kind of, it is more relaxed than David Rovics' song is, right?
Sure, yeah.
You know, the tune bum 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 bum. You know, it's kind of slightly happier a little bit,
Has a
not a
jolliness
lot,
to it. Yeah, it's not cheery,
but
but it is definitely like cheerier than
yeah,
Rovics for
it's
sure.
it's not as angry, right? The tone of the song isn't as angry from the offset, but then the subject matter is, I mean, quite angry, or you know, a little bit of despair, descriptive of negative change, and that, you know, if you read this song with a certain light, you can go, oh, but it's good that they're taking, you know, the the prostitutes off the street, and they're getting rid of Skid Row, and yeah, but all those people have to go somewhere, and they
Yeah,
always do.
yeah. And it's just moving
And
around, and it's just move. At some point, it's just moving a problem around, right?
right,
And in no way am I trying to say that the people like are the problem, but the context that they are experiencing is felt by all in the city. And I think at some point we got to stop ignoring it and stop just trying to move it, right? And then this is not to say that to paint some only cheery, you know, perspective of homelessness. There again, as with my story earlier, yeah, there's some trifling folk out there, but we can't let those individuals. I guess we shouldn't let those individuals kind of allow us to paint or stereotype a whole thing across the entire set, right? We shouldn't allow ourselves to do that. But this song is actually really, really poignant. I thought that it got a lot across, and without sounding kind of, because Landlord, you can just tell right away that, you know, he's got an agenda, right? Like he's got to talk.
He has intent.
Yeah,
He has this vigorous intent with the song, whereas this one seems to be, at least in my opinion, when you hear it, we said a little more cheery. For me, it just also felt like you're venting, but it's almost like we'll deal with it almost.
yeah.
And then with Landlord, it's almost like the more aggressive nature of like, okay, we've been at this for a while. Now things have to get done.
Yeah. There's an
And
urgency in
changed.
the first one, and the second one, even though you'd think that urgency would carry through, right? Because he still talk. It almost feels like they took after each other, and like talking about different
Right.
times, and like you
Yeah.
know, Utah Phillips is more of just kind of like an old timey, you know, folk singer who's just singing another folk song, but the lyrics are just heavy, like because if you're not paying attention to the lyrics, you're probably not going to catch the meaning. Like if you're just jamming it and it's in the background, you might just be like, okay, like this is a nice background folky song. But I think you could play this at a Starbucks somewhere and it might not get noticed. But
Probably not.
but if you were to actually read the lyrics, the one that really got me, where I was like, oh, this is interesting, right? Speaking of that hooker line, it's like you ran out the hookers who worked on the street, but built a new club where the playboys can meet. So you're just moving the vices in a way that looks better to you, right? That's the notion. Or the one that's like, my bookie joint closed when your cops made a raid, but you built a new hall for the stock market trade. Like, what is, you know, the stock market, but to some extent a level of gambling, right? But it's a societally accepted notion of gambling because you're investing regardless into the economy, right? That's the idea. Because even if it's a bad
Right, and
bet,
you can tax the club.
yeah, and you could tax the club. But like here, it's like, well, I mean, I get it. You don't like the prostitutes, but you didn't fix prostitution. You just fancied up the place, right? It's like, you don't like my bookie, all right, but it's not like you have a problem with gambling. It's more
Right.
like you have a problem with the context of gambling, right? And so it's a really interesting, like, again, he's saying this in such a soothing kind of meter and tone, but the words he's saying are pretty heavy. Like, I kind of laughed out loud when I read that verse. Like, that just cracked me up. I was like, yeah, that's really clever. Like, that's really clever.
So, John, you said it's almost like they follow one another, right? Utah Phillips came,
Yeah.
and then David Rovics was kind of influenced by. Well, you're right, because they're both anarchists,
Oh, I can sense it.
and they're both well, Utah Phillips is dead now, but when
Rest
they
in
were both
peace.
alive, they were both, and David Rovics still is a wobbly, a member of the Industrial Workers of the World, and the IWW has and has a long history of socially cutting commentary, really sharp commentary,
I believe it.
through song.
Yeah.
I actually have reaches over their book, which is originally it was the Little Red Songbook, but now it's the Big Red Songbook. 250 IWW songs.
So you literally,
And
when I was talking about these songs, you literally, I think you what you called it a book. You called it a book of hymns.
yeah, the book of hymns.
Yeah, which most people would ascribe to religiosity, right? But in this context, it's very literal. Like it literally is a book of hymns.
A lot of the original, a lot of the old wobbly songs were hymns. Because what is the point of a song? It's a political song. It's to be catchy, but you also want people to understand it and click with it right away.
Yeah.
So religion was that.
Yeah.
I mean, religious songs, you had always heard them. Even if you weren't particularly religious, you heard them in society.
Yeah.
They were sung on street corners and revivals and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you made a good point as to why it was interesting to me, is because I think it's such an interesting thing, right? I think I told this to Todd, but for anyone who's made it this far, I know we're going really into depth on these topics, but I think it's a good conversation. Think back before ads. Think back before, the way we think of ads today. Think back before, being able to just throw an MP3 or give away a flash drive with resources on there. Think way before that. How do you get a message to proliferate through society? Well, this is one of the things that I'm so happy Will taught me over many cigars and discussions. But I really enjoyed the whole notion of there's history in these normal songs, the dun 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 dun, like just simple rhythms that as part of being of this cohort that's alive today, right? A lot of these individuals would just use that same hymn, hijack it, use different words, and would use it as political slogans. And that's just fascinating to me. How before we had ads, they were just songs.
It's almost like a universal, like musically charged blank slate, just for anyone to kind of talk about their social issues on. And I think that's very much what it is.
I would agree. Yeah, no, it's been quite a conversation where we just passed the 2-hour mark. So that's why I know that time is going to fly here. And Will and I have had conversations that spanned hours. So I definitely knew this was going to happen. But this is good. Will, is there anything you want to cover on these songs? Or do you like our coverage of it so far?
Yeah, I like it. I would like to just, the Utah Phillips wrote a lot of really good music. David Rovics is still writing a lot of really good music. Rovics tends to have a slightly angrier tinge.
Yeah.
But Utah Phillips is not without his anger. And he was also a great speaker. So when he does, and you hear it on a lot of his live recordings, he talks to the crowd, and he'll talk to his fellow musicians on stage. I sent you a song actually, John, where I was like, oh, maybe this one, but he was talking quite a bit in it. And
Mr. Block,
in terms of getting, Mr. Block, which is an old wobbly song. And he kind of talks to the crowd, and it's all good. But one of his quotes that is just filled with anger, I'd like to share.
Sure.
He said, "The earth is not dying; it is being killed, and those who are killing it have names and addresses."
Jeez.
Very direct.
that is, it has a lot of implications to it, doesn't it?
It does.
And it's those who are killing it have names and addresses. They're people. They live somewhere. They live among us.
Yeah.
And they're killing the earth.
And
so it's going to be pretty easy to stop them from killing the earth because they're people. They have names and addresses.
They're everyday folk.
They're exactly.
Yeah.
They're just like us, but unfortunately, they have money and power. So, and he's got a lot of other great quotes. I mean, not to get too bogged down in quotes here, but he's got a lot of good ones.
And that's the kind of the thing, right? If you want to share one more, you can. Then we might start moving to close. But I'm down.
That's
to
a
hear
really
one more.
sharp one, though. That one really stuck to me.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it there because the next ones that I have here in front of me they're good,
poignant.
But I think that's so sharp. It ties in so well with what we've been discussing.
Yeah. You have actual people
I'll
working towards this. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, no, just go. I'll leave it with that one.
I think it's really. I'm happy you shared those with me. I'm definitely down to continue doing this moving forward. I feel like, Will, you've educated me quite a bit on a lot of these topics, and I don't think I would have as strong a grasp on history without some of these conversations. And so my intent was to kind of share this with people, share this with Todd as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be. Once you mentioned that Utah Phillips, I didn't realize what period of time he was from. But now looking at some of the stuff on YouTube, I would definitely love to hear him talk. So that's what I'm going to go do.
Mr. Block is something we might discuss next time. It's a lot more of a chant, in the sense of like it's a really big like speech, but it's done kind of to a rhythm.
It's a song, and there's just straight song versions of it.
Oh, okay. So that was just one of those random ones then.
Yeah, he talks to the crowd more, but he talks to the crowd more in the beginning of that song, and then after a certain amount of time, he's just singing it, and the crowd is singing the chorus with him because the chorus is really easy.
Yeah,
which is the point.
Exactly.
Of so many songs,
And that's one thing. It's just I've talking about the 60s, we've had our political songs, 70s political songs, and I've always been looking for our political songs of today. And this is not to say anyone who's made it through this far of the podcast that we agree. At least I don't agree wholeheartedly with a lot of these ideas. I know that all of us have different perspectives on this, but no matter where you sit on the spectrum of any of these political views, these philosophical views, I think that there is a point where rubber hits the road, and I think that these songs are trying to remind people of that. I think these songs are trying to for better, for worse, whether you agree or disagree, they're trying to convey something. And for some of these individuals, especially like how Rovics sings and some of the things that Utah Phillips says, no matter whether you agree or disagree, they're speaking with fervor, with like they're pushed by a passion of the event itself, like with an inspiration, I guess is the right way to say it. They're inspired speakers, and I think that listening to them, whether you agree or disagree, you can listen to a song and disagree with them, and that's okay. But I think knowing what the person's talking about, because like I disagreed with parts of the landlord element of Rovics because I'm not an anarchist, but I can understand why an anarchist would be so angry, and I can understand the vivid cases that the anarchist is going to point to, right? Because I likely disagree. I likely don't like that landlord either. But my way of handling said landlord might be different, right? Is the distinction there? But damn, these are good topics. I didn't think that these were going to be as long conversations when we agreed to them, but I'm happy we agreed to them.
Well, you've got me on, John, so nothing we do is ever short-winded.
No. Yeah. Nothing we ever do is short-winded. Also, when I said SES earlier, I just saw your message. I was talking about socioeconomic status. So I was talking about bracketing. So social brackets, financial brackets.
Yes. Okay.
So that so ultimately, right? So let's see. Anybody have any final thoughts? Last words?
I was going to say that I know we didn't add that third song, But
Oh, do you
now
want
that
to talk about it?
oh, not necessarily because it has gone on for a little bit, but that one is is more of a chant. In my opinion, it's much more simple than both of these. But I feel like if we had put these in order, the 1 second.
It's called
A
Yeah,
Utah
Bella
Phillips song.
Ciao.
Bella Ciao.
Yeah, Utah Phillips song. If we were to put these in order for me, it would be Utah Phillips, and then it would be Landlord, and then it would be the this last one, because I feel like that last one just feels more like it almost feels more desperate, and like you're chanting the same thing because they know what they need and they know what they want. And I know there's a lyric in there that talks about being buried near a mountainside, and it almost feels like you've either been defeated or you've gotten to a point of peace.
Yeah, or you
with these issues.
Well, it's a partisan song. It's about fighting fascists.
Right.
So the whole thing, and it's based off of well, I won't spend too much time, but it's based off of just a folk song. As so many songs are
right?
based off of, right? And so it's about saying goodbye. The whole song is about saying goodbye. I'm going to go fight the fascists, and if I die as an anti-fascist, as a partisan, bury me in the mountain, so that the flowers can bloom over me. And when everyone passes by my grave, they'll say, "What a beautiful flower," Bella Ciao.
That's really great, because I honestly, I'll go ahead and link that in the description as well. I'll link all these songs, and I think that if I were to go through this, as far as message goes, and passion, I would kind of go the inverse with the first two. I'd say Landlord first, Utah Phillips second, and then the Bella Ciao would be third too. But I don't want that third spot to kind of give the impression that it's a bad thing. I think Bella Ciao is a beautiful freaking song. It carries something to it, and the fact that you say that it's basically a swan song, in the sense of like, I'm leaving, for better for worse, right? And I think that it carries that weight to it, because it definitely, as soon as I heard it, I don't know Italian, but I know the vein of it, so I can kind of read part of it. And so I'm looking through it, and I'm like, man, this just feels like it's carrying weight to it. I didn't even know the true meaning of it, but you saying that makes so much sense.
And I don't speak Italian. I don't want to give that impression. I mean, I literally went to Wikipedia.
Yes, and you reviewed
and I reviewed the lyrics translation, but you can also and so you listen to it while reading along. And I do that kind of thing because I'm a madman. All the time I do it.
That's okay. That's the right way to do it.
But it's the last two lines are well, the last lyric said is, this is the flower of the partisan. Oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. This is the flower of the partisan who died for freedom. Right. It's like it's fighting against authoritarianism, against fascism, and I think it's quite uplifting. And and Bella Ciao is just goodbye, beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, goodbye, my darling.
Yep.
I'm going off to fight.
And you just get that feeling, and I like how they repeat it too. It's kind of like that's the focus, right? Is goodbye, my darling, goodbye, my darling. Like it hits really, really well. Okay, I think I have a question that could help us to close out the podcast today.
What's that, John?
If not, this will be an abrupt end because it got awkward and it just didn't work. So you might hear the podcast end now.
Goodbye, folks. It's been fun.
But no. You were saying
you gotta split off like the last couple minutes and like, okay, so you have choice A or B of how this one will end.
Exactly right.
Choose your own adventure.
Exactly.
Just like
B
elevator
video.
music.
Yep, just the nice little snap there too. But I found this question on Reddit, and I think it's just a gorgeous one. So if your username is the answer, what is the question?
Oh.
Username.
If my username is the answer, what is the question? Well, my username
you might want to be careful.
Is no, it's a fun song. It's a fun song. We've been talking about songs. Excuse me. It's a fun story. My username is a it's a paraphrase of a wrong answer a student gave me on an exam.
Oh, okay.
So, the story being, blah 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 blah. I was a history TA, and the question was something along the lines of, what was the bloodless change in regime that England experienced after the beheading of a previous king? So there had been a king that was beheaded. There was some bad stuff that happened, some good stuff that happened, but mostly bad. And then they bring in a new regime.
Yeah.
And the answer was the Glorious Revolution. And this student wrote something along the lines of the beheading of King Rebellion. And I thought, the beheading of King Rebellion, that sounds amazing. And then I am King Rebellion and then X,
Yeah.
because I don't know what king it was. Is it a King Rebellion? Is that the name of the guy? Is it the King's Rebellion and he was beheaded? The king? We don't get a name? You know,
You just don't know.
I don't know.
There's so many
It's just-
possibilities.
so a lot of people think I'm King Rebellion. That's my name, and I'm the 10th. I'm the 10th King Rebellion. My father, who was King Rebellion, and of course his father, who was King Rebellion.
And
And of
his
course
before
his father was George, and then his father was King Rebellion. So
There's always that odd one. But I like that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I've always thought when you say, I don't know why, I've always thought that it was like more of like a history wave off of the hand. Like, oh, what is this? It's a King Rebellion X, whichever one it was. You know, like it's
Yeah, but it could be that too. See, there's so many things it could be, and
like,
not even I know.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And that wrong answer has always stuck with me. And I love it. So it's my name.
And it works. I've always loved that name. I think it works with you, especially given the type of things we talk about too. So
Right.
All right, Todd, you want to go next?
Sure. So I guess your question is, if my username was the answer, what's the question? The question was, it's funny because people did ask me this on a certain period of time, nothing to do with any kind of classes or students or anything like that. But the question would probably be, what are you doing tonight? And I would say, well, I'm having a drink with Sully, because I grabbed that from a game that I was a game called Uncharted that I was playing years ago, and I had it in enamorment with a character named Sully, who was kind of like the father figure, and he reminded me a lot of my dad. So I always thought, if I could actually sit down with this man, I would have a drink with him, whether it be coffee or alcoholic. And it's very
Nice.
simple.
Yeah, but
it's a very simple one.
But I've always liked that name too because of how simple it is, and it also is an action. It's one I've always liked usernames that have an action to them, and so like the drinks with Sully, I'm like, oh, I like it.
Yeah, and I even got this art that I have. I didn't grab that from the internet. I commissioned it. Someone drew it for me, and they actually nailed it perfectly.
Yeah, it's something I really enjoy. Was that commission, and I think it's something that's been with you for a while too.
I have a couple of them, but this is the most personifying, I guess, of all the ones that I have.
So I guess going into mine, so mine's Daliodoma. That's it's a mouthful, but DAELIODOMA. And what's the question that's the answer is what's a massive idea that I have not put enough time into as much as I've thought about it. Daliodoma. I'm writing I'm working on a novel. I'm working on kind of like I guess what I want to be a novel or short stories. There's a science fiction idea I've had since probably 2014, 2013, and I just really need to work on that. And Daliodoma is pretty much like this amalgamation of stories that I have in my mind that probably not many people know about, maybe outside of just Todd and people listening to this now. But I'm just obsessed with science fiction, and that name, the answer, is basically Daliodoma to what's a freaking science fiction story that I have yet to finish writing or even start fully. I'm definitely going to. I'll probably share that with you, Will. I'm curious what you would think of it too, but I'm just addicted to science fiction right now. It's ridiculous.
And maybe I won't add too much of that, but I did enjoy what I read. So it's been kind of something that's in my mind, honestly. Like I can already there are moments where I pictured certain things. I'm like, okay, I like this.
This is fun, right? But I'm actually lucky. I basically created the username a long time ago, and to date, it's just never been taken in any spot. So I'm just lucky as hell that it hasn't been taken. But out of all of ours, I think I prefer Will's random one, because that student probably has no idea that they left an impression on Will, and like
None,
no
idea.
And that student's
and here's the thing. I don't know who it was. Like, I don't remember the student. I don't remember the name, and that's good. I mean, that's what it should be, right? Like sometimes you shouldn't remember who like got a wrong answer on an exam, but I remember the answer.
Yeah,
it's created this online name and kind of not persona type thing, right?
it just has no idea.
Yeah. And I'm very grateful to be on this podcast. Hello, listeners. And I've been on Twitch streams and things like that, and I'm King Rebellion. Go, oh, King Rebellion, how's it going? And I'm like, they don't know me, but they do know King Rebellion, and it's like, it's this own world where I'm not Will. I'm not from South Texas. I'm King Rebellion from somewhere.
Yeah, and you carry
this
this presence with you as you go through it.
Yeah, you're King Rebellion or De Leodoma or
Drinks with Sully.
Drinks with Sully.
Yeah. All right, I think we're good to end it there, guys. How do you feel?
Good. Feel really good.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining us. Well, I do appreciate it. I've definitely learned a bit today, and some things have definitely stuck with me.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
No, for sure. Will, I would be happy to have you back at some point. This is always some good conversations. Doesn't have to carry tunes with it, but you're always welcome to.
Okay. Well, I can find more music and I can send it use guys' ways.
That works. But if you've made it this far, please do take some time to like and subscribe on this thing. If you feel a certain way about these videos, these songs, please do comment about it. Try to be as kind as possible. These are huge political ideologies we're discussing. But I think these are some good discussions to have, so long as we, compose ourselves. But all right, if there's nothing else, I guess we'll go ahead and call it there. Y'all have a good one.
Likewise.
Alrighty. Y'all have a good night or morning, whenever you're watching this.